A single act of mercy can be a death sentence. In the winter of 1877, one woman, Sarah Monroe, was trapped by the worst blizzard the Wyoming Territory had seen in a decade. She was alone, grieving, and fighting for survival. But when a cry cut through the wind, she found something in the snow that would change her life forever. A newborn baby, wrapped in Comanche furs, left to die. She saved him. She defied her husband and brought the storm into their home. But days later, the real storm arrived. Not snow, but riders. 50 Apache warriors, their faces painted for war, emerging from the white wilderness. They didn't come for the blizzard. They came for the baby. The wind didn't howl, it screamed. It was a physical thing, a solid wall of white that pressed against the little cabin on Monroe's Creek. For 3 days, Sarah Monroe had watched the world disappear. First, the distant Powder River Mountains, then the creek bed, then the split-rail fence just 50 yards from her porch. Now she couldn't even see the barn. Inside, the silence was almost as loud as the wind. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that lived in the space between her and her husband, Jacob. "It's letting up," Jacob said, peering through a small patch he'd scraped in the window frost. His voice was rough from disuse. Sarah looked up from the empty cradle she'd been mending, or just holding. It had been meant for their son, Thomas. Thomas had been still and cold when he came into the world 6 months ago, just as the winter was setting in. The cradle had sat empty ever since, a monument to the silence. "It's just taking a breath," Sarah replied, her voice flat. "It'll be back." Jacob sighed, turning from the window. He was a good man, a practical man. He saw the world in terms of fences that needed mending, livestock that needed feeding, and blizzards that needed surviving. He did not understand the grief that rooted her to that empty cradle. "We're low on feed for the horses," he said. "If this doesn't break by tomorrow, I'll have to." A sound cut him off. It wasn't the wind. It was thin, sharp, and agonizingly human. Sarah shot to her feet, dropping the mending cloth. "What was that?" Jacob tilted his head. "I don't hear nothing. It's the wind, Sarah. It plays tricks." "No." She grabbed her heavy bison coat from the peg. It was a cry. "Sarah, don't," Jacob said, his voice hardening. "You can't go out there. You'll be lost in 10 steps. It's suicide." "I heard it, Jacob." She heard it again, fainter this time, a desperate, fading wail. It hit her in the chest, the exact place where the ache for Thomas lived. She didn't wait for him. She threw open the cabin door, and the world exploded. The cold was a physical blow. It stole her breath and stung her eyes, a fine powder of ice crystals blasting her face. The wind ripped the door from her hand, slamming it against the cabin wall. "Sarah, get back here! Damn it, woman!" Jacob yelled, grabbing his own coat. But she was already moving, pushing into the white oblivion. She wrapped her scarf tighter around her face, leaving only her eyes. The snow was already past her knees, drifting into massive piles that obscured every landmark. She followed the sound, not with her ears anymore, but with the memory of it. It was a mother's instinct, sharpened by loss. "Please, God," she whispered, her words stolen by the gale. She stumbled over what she thought was a fallen log, but it was soft, a drift, and in the lee of the drift, sheltered from the worst of the wind, was a bundle. It wasn't just a bundle, it was a cradle board. Sarah fell to her knees, her gloved hands frantically brushing away the snow. The beadwork was intricate. Geometric patterns of blue and white she recognized instantly. Comanche. Her blood ran colder than the blizzard. This was Indian territory. But this was a nightmare. Inside the furs, a tiny, dark-skinned face, pinched and blue with cold, looked up at her. The baby was silent now, its small reserve of energy spent. Its eyes were barely open. "Oh, Lord," she breathed. She ripped the cradleboard from the snow, pulling the entire bundle against her chest, trying to shield it with her own body. "Sarah!" Jacob's voice was a roar just behind her. He had a rope tied around his waist, the other end presumably tied to the cabin. He saw the bundle. His face, already red from the cold, went pale. "Jacob, it's a baby! It's alive!" "Put it down," Jacob said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Sarah, put it back. Now." "What are you saying? It's a baby! He's dying!" "It's Comanche," Jacob seethed, grabbing her arm. "Do you know what this means? They don't just lose a baby, they leave them. Or it's a trap, or they were attacked. Either way, they will come looking for it. And if they find it with us, he will be dead in an hour!" she shrieked, clutching the bundle. "I don't care who he is. I won't let him die. You're going to get us killed. You're bringing a death warrant into our house." "Then let it come," Sarah screamed, her grief and rage and desperate, broken love erupting in one terrible cry. "I lost one baby to this land. I will not let it take another." She turned and pushed past him, following the rope back toward the invisible cabin. The baby in her arms was a tiny, cold weight. Jacob stood frozen in the snow for a moment, caught between the blizzard and the wife he no longer recognized. With a curse that was swallowed by the storm, he followed her, pulling the cabin door shut against the end of the world. The cabin, once a refuge, was now a prison. The air crackled with a new, volatile tension. Jacob stoked the fire, his movements jerky and angry. Sarah sat at the hearth, stripping the frozen, wet furs from the cradleboard. The baby was a boy. He couldn't have been more than a few days old. His skin was a dusky, pale copper, his breathing shallow and rattling. "He's half frozen," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking. She unwrapped him, her own skin recoiling from the icy chill of his. She chafed his tiny limbs, wrapped him in a wool blanket meant for Thomas, and held him close to the fire. "It's a mistake, Sarah," Jacob said, not looking at her. He was checking the latch on the door, the bar on the windows. "It's a child, Jacob. It's their child, not ours. What happens in 2 days? 3? The storm breaks, and a war party shows up. What do you say to them, Sarah?" "We just found him." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "They'll see the cradleboard. They'll see him, warm by our fire. They'll see a thief, a kidnapper, and they will burn this cabin to the ground with us in it." "They left him," Sarah insisted, her voice breaking. "What kind of people would leave a baby in a blizzard?" "People who are running," Jacob said, his voice low. "People who are being hunted, or people who are hunting someone else. You don't know the way of it, Sarah. You just feel. You don't think." The accusation stung, but she ignored it. The baby let out a tiny, weak cough. His lungs sounded wet. Sarah looked at the cradleboard. It was beautiful work, lined with soft rabbit fur. Tucked into the side was a small rawhide pouch. She opened it. Inside was a handful of dried herbs and a small amulet, a piece of dark, polished obsidian carved in the shape of a thunderbird. It was smooth and heavy. She tucked it into her pocket. For the next 2 days, the blizzard raged. The world was a white noise of screaming wind. And inside, a different battle was waged. The baby developed a fever. His weak cries filled the cabin, a sound that both tortured and comforted Sarah. It was the sound of life, however fragile. She did what she could. She had some dried willow bark, which she boiled into a bitter tea, forcing a few drops past his lips to fight the fever. She spent hours holding him against her bare skin, wrapped in blankets, trying to pour her own warmth into his tiny body. Jacob watched, his face a mask of grim resentment. He slept by the door, his rifle loaded, propped against the wall. Every creak of the logs, every shift in the wind made him jump. "You're humming to it," he said on the second night. Sarah stopped. She hadn't even realized. It was the same lullaby she had planned to sing to Thomas. "He has a fever, Jacob. He needs his mother, and she's either dead or she's Comanche, and I don't know which is worse." He stood up and paced the small cabin. "We're trapped in here. We've got maybe 3 days of firewood left in the lean-to. And you're playing house with an Indian baby while the world ends outside." "He's just a baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why can't you see him? He's just a baby, like Thomas." That was the wrong thing to say. Jacob turned on her, his eyes blazing with a grief that matched her own. "He is nothing like Thomas," he roared, and the baby startled, letting out a thin wail. "Thomas was ours. He was safe. This is a stone you picked up. A stone that's going to sink us both. Don't you dare compare him to our son." He grabbed his coat. "Jacob, where are you going? You can't." "I'm checking the livestock. I'd rather face the storm than sit in here and watch you kill us." He slammed the door, and Sarah was left alone, with the fire, the wailing wind, and the sick child in her arms. She rocked him, her tears falling on his small, feverish face. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice fierce. "It's okay. I've got you. I won't let you go." She felt the obsidian amulet in her pocket. It was strangely warm to the touch. She didn't know what she had brought into her home. She only knew that Jacob was wrong. This wasn't a stone. It was a splinter, and it had lodged itself deep in her heart. The storm broke on the morning of the 4th day. It didn't end gently. The wind simply stopped, as if a great hand had been lifted. The silence that followed was deafening, absolute. The baby's fever had broken in the night. He was weak, but his breathing was easier. He was asleep in the cradle, Thomas's cradle, near the fire. Sarah and Jacob hadn't spoken since their fight. The truce was as fragile as the new morning light. Jacob pulled on his boots, his face etched with exhaustion. "I'm checking the barn. God knows if the horses are even still alive." He stepped outside. The world was unrecognizable. It was a new landscape, sculpted by the wind into massive, sweeping drifts, some as high as the cabin's roof. The sun on the snow was blinding. Sarah watched him from the window, the baby in her arms. Jacob waded through the chest-deep snow, his rifle in hand. It took him 10 minutes to cross the 50 yards to the barn. He disappeared inside. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Maybe they would be all right. Maybe the storm had covered their tracks, buried the past. Maybe the baby's family was long gone, and he was just hers now. The thought was a guilty, desperate prayer. An hour passed. The baby woke and made a small, hungry noise. Sarah had nothing for him. She'd been giving him snow water mixed with a little sugar. But it wasn't enough. He needed real food. Just as a knot of panic began to tighten in her stomach, the cabin door burst open. Jacob stumbled in, his face as white as the snow outside. He slammed the door and barred it, his hands shaking so badly he could barely slide the heavy wooden beam into place. "Jacob, what is it?" "The horses." "The horses are fine," he breathed, leaning against the door, his eyes wide with terror. "We're not." "What did you see?" "Tracks," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Out by the ridge, not Indian tracks, shod horses. At least a dozen of them." Sarah's heart hammered. "Settlers? Trappers?" "No," Jacob said, pushing himself off the door. He walked to the window, peering out the side toward the ridge. They were at the barn, last night, or early this morning. They tried to get in. The new drift must have stopped them. Who, Jacob? He didn't answer. He just pointed. Sarah moved to his side. Out by the creek bed, he whispered. By the copse of cottonwoods. She squinted against the bright white. At first she saw nothing, just snow and trees. Then a splash of color, a dark shape, mostly buried. It's a man, Jacob said, his voice dead. He didn't make it. One of the riders? Aye. Looks like he got separated from the others. He's frozen solid. But that's not the problem, Sarah. The problem is the scarf. The scarf. He's wearing one, a red scarf, bright red. I've seen it before, down at Sutter's Creek. The whole gang wears them. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She knew who he meant. Everyone in the territory knew. The Red Scarf Gang, she whispered. Silas Croft, Jacob confirmed. Ex-Confederate butchers, the lot of them. They raided a northbound wagon train last fall. Didn't leave anyone alive, not even the children. They're not just thieves, Sarah. They're killers. He turned to face her, his eyes burning with a desperate, terrified anger. They were here, he said, jabbing a finger toward the door. At our barn, looking for shelter, looking for food, horses. And they'll be back. The man in the snow. He's just one. The others are out there. Wounded, maybe. Freezing. And desperate. He looked from the window to the cradle where the baby boy was sleeping. You were so worried about the Comanche, he said, his voice breaking. You were so worried about a war party showing up at our door. He let out a hollow, terrifying laugh. You invited the storm right in, Sarah. But you were worried about the wrong one. Sarah stared out the window at the frozen man in the snow, a bright red banner of death around his neck. Jacob was right. They were trapped. Not just by the snow, but between two worlds, two threats. A war party they couldn't see, and a gang of murderers they could. And she was standing in the middle, holding a baby that belonged to neither of them. The next 2 days were a new kind of hell. The quiet was worse than the storm. Every snap of a frozen branch, every slide of snow from the roof, sent Jacob lunging for his rifle. They were prisoners in their own home, besieged by an invisible enemy. The dead man in the cottonwoods was a constant, frozen reminder. Silas Croft's men were out there. The blinding white expanse, which had seemed so pure and new, now felt like a shroud, hiding threats in every shadow and drift. Sarah's focus was singular. The baby. She called him Adam in her own mind. A first man, a new beginning. He was getting stronger. His eyes, dark and impossibly deep, followed her as she moved. The bond was no longer a choice. It was a fact. She loved him. She loved him with the fierce, protective energy of a mother who had already known the worst loss. Jacob saw it, and it terrified him. He boarded up the back window, leaving only the front window and the peepholes he'd drilled by the door. They'll come at dusk, he muttered, cleaning his rifle for the 10th time. Croft always moves at dusk, or dawn. He'll see the smoke from our chimney. He knows we're here. He's just waiting. Letting the cold do its work, maybe. Waiting for what, Jacob? For us to get weak, or for his men to get desperate enough to risk it. Sarah held Adam close. She'd found a can of sweetened milk in the back of the pantry, saved for a special occasion. She'd punctured it, watering it down and feeding it to the baby a few drops at a time from a strip of clean cloth. He was eating. He was surviving. On the 3rd day after the blizzard, just as the sun was beginning to dip, painting the snow in shades of bloody orange and bruised purple, Jacob went rigid. He was at the peephole. "Sarah," he whispered, and the terror in his voice was nothing she had ever heard before. "Sarah, get in the root cellar. Now." "What? Is it Croft?" "No," he said, his voice strangled. "Worse. Oh God, so much worse. What is it?" she demanded, rushing to the front window. Jacob grabbed her, trying to pull her away. "Don't look, just take the baby and go." But she was already there. She looked past the barn, up to the ridge that marked the edge of their small valley, and she saw them. They weren't the disorganized, half-frozen shapes of outlaws. They were riders, dozens of them. They sat on their horses, still as the winter air, dark silhouettes against the dying sun. They wore buffalo hide parkas and carried lances and rifles. They were not Comanche. Their feathers, their markings. "Apache," Jacob breathed, his hand going slack on her arm. "Jicarilla or Mescalero, I can't tell. But they're Apache." There weren't a dozen. There were 50, at least, a full war party. They had emerged from the snow as if born from it. They weren't riding fast. They were moving with a slow, deliberate purpose, fanning out in a wide semicircle that would cut off all escape. This was the nightmare Jacob had promised. "They're not supposed to be this far north," Sarah whispered, her mind racing. "The treaty." "Treaties don't mean anything out here," Jacob snapped, his panic turning to a desperate, cold resolve. He grabbed the heavy bar for the door. "They're hunting, and they found him." His eyes flicked to the cradleboard, which Sarah had cleaned and set by the fire. The distinctive Comanche beadwork seemed to glow in the twilight. "They're enemies," Jacob said, understanding dawning on his face. "The Apache and the Comanche. They've been at war for 100 years. They must have been tracking the party that left him. And they found our smoke." Sarah's heart stopped. "What will they do?" "To him," Jacob said, his voice hollow. "He's Comanche. They'll kill him. After they kill us for keeping him." "No." "Quick," Jacob commanded, grabbing her. He ripped open the trap door to the small, dark cellar where they kept their winter provisions. "Get in. Take the baby. Be quiet, no matter what you hear. Do not make a sound. Do you understand me, Sarah?" "Jacob, what are you going to do?" she cried, clutching Adam, who had started to fuss. "I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to tell them we found nothing, that we saw nothing. I'll give them food, tobacco, anything. But they cannot find that baby, Sarah. They cannot. I won't leave you." "You will," he roared, shaking her. "If they find him, we all die. If you hide, you and he, you might have a chance. They might just take what they want and leave. Now go!" He pushed her toward the hole. Sarah looked at her husband, this practical, frightened man, now willing to stand alone against 50 warriors to buy her a few minutes of life. She kissed him, hard and fast. "I love you, Jacob." "Be quiet," he whispered, his face a mask of tragedy. She climbed down into the damp, earthy darkness. Jacob handed her the baby, who was now whimpering. "Shh, Adam, shh, shh," she pleaded, pressing him to her chest. Jacob slid the heavy trap door over her head, plunging her into total blackness. A moment later, she heard the thick bearskin rug being dragged over the door, hiding it from view. Above her, she heard the click of Jacob's rifle. She heard the heavy bar being lifted from the door. She heard the cabin door open. And then, silence. A new, terrifying silence, filled with the presence of the men on the ridge. She held her breath, praying the baby would not cry. In the blackness of the cellar, every sound from above was magnified. Sarah huddled against a sack of potatoes, her body rigid. Adam was blessedly quiet, his small face buried in her coat. She heard the crunch of moccasins on the wooden floor. Not one set. Many. The cabin was full of men. "Where is food?" a deep voice asked. The English was heavily accented, but clear. "We don't have much," Jacob's voice answered, tight with fear. "The blizzard, we have salt pork, coffee, flour. Take what you need." "You are alone," the voice stated. It wasn't a question. My wife," Jacob stammered. She's not well. She's in the bedroom." Sarah realized he was trying to keep them from searching that corner, the corner where the trap door was. "We do not seek women," the voice said. "We seek white men. Nakai Yesen. White eyes. Murderers." A pause. Sarah could hear the sound of someone opening their cupboards, the clatter of a tin cup. "We saw," Jacob said, his voice a little stronger. "We saw a dead man, by the creek, wore a red scarf." The silence that followed was absolute. "You saw this?" the deep voice asked, a new urgency in it. "This morning," froze solid. "Kyle," another voice called from outside. "He speaks truth. There is a man. Red scarf, same as the others." The man in the cabin, Kyle, must have been the leader. He spoke again, this time in his own language. The reply was a chorus of grunts. Kyle returned his attention to Jacob. "These men, the red scarves, you know them?" "I know of them. Silas Croft's gang. They're butchers." "Butchers," Kyle repeated, tasting the word. "Yes. They attacked a camp. Not our camp. Comanche." Sarah's blood ran cold. "They killed women," Kyle continued, his voice heavy with a disgust that transcended language. "They killed children. They did this for gold, for horses. They do not care about the war they start." "War?" Jacob asked. "The Comanche they killed. It was the wife of Iron Eagle, a great chief. He thinks we did this, the Apache. He thinks we broke the truce. He gathers his warriors. He will ride against our people, and he will ride against your people. He will burn everything from here to the Laramie River. There will be a great war, all because of these butchers." Sarah clamped a hand over her own mouth, the baby in her arms, the one with the Comanche beadwork. "We track Croft," Kyle explained. "We must bring him to Iron Eagle. We must show him the Nakai Yesen are the true enemy, not the Apache. We found their trail 2 days ago. They were wounded. They fought us at the river. They are desperate. They lost men, like the one in your creek." "So, you're not here for us?" Jacob asked, his voice full of disbelief. "We are here for Croft," Kyle said, "and we are here for what he stole." "Stole? You said they killed everyone." "Not everyone," Kyle said, and Sarah felt the floorboards above her vibrate as he took a step. "They took the son, the child of Iron Eagle, a newborn baby. They took him as a prize, or a shield. We do not know. But if we do not find that child, there is no peace. There is only blood. Have you seen this child?" A terrible, agonizing silence. Sarah could picture Jacob, his face pale, his eyes darting toward the bearskin rug. "No," Jacob said. His voice was too quick, too high. No child. Just us. We've seen no child." Kyle said nothing for a long time. Sarah could hear him breathing. "You lie," Kyle said, his voice flat. I swear, we have no—" "You lie," Kyle repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I see it. A cradle. There. By the fire." Sarah's heart stopped. The cradle board. She had cleaned it. Jacob had left it by the fire. It's my wife's," Jacob stammered. We lost a child. She holds it." "The cradle," Kyle said, "is Comanche. The beadwork is of the Quahadi people, the family of Iron Eagle." The floorboards creaked. Kyle was walking toward the rug. Do not, Jacob started. "You are a fool," Kyle said, his voice filled with a sudden, cold rage. "You hide the one thing that can stop the war. You hide the son of Iron Eagle from the men who are trying to save him." Sarah heard the heavy thud of Jacob's body hitting the floor. "Jacob!" she screamed, her voice muffled by the wood. "There!" Kyle yelled. "In the floor!" The bearskin rug was ripped away. Light flooded the cellar as the trap door was torn open. Sarah scrambled back, shielding Adam, who was now screaming, terrified by the noise. A warrior dropped into the cellar, grabbing her by the arm and hauling her out. She stumbled onto the cabin floor, blinking in the firelight. The cabin was filled with Apache warriors. Jacob was on his knees, a rifle barrel pressed to his head. And standing in the center of the room was Kyle. He was a tall, imposing man, his face painted with black and white stripes. He looked from Sarah to the wailing baby in her arms, and then to the rifle at Jacob's head. He let out a long, slow breath. "You," he said to Sarah, "have made a terrible mistake." Sarah stood frozen, her arms locked around the crying baby. The air in the cabin was thick enough to cut. Kyle's dark eyes bored into her, and she saw no mercy in them. She saw only a cold, hard purpose. "Please," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. We didn't know. We found him. In the blizzard. He was dying. He is Comanche," the warrior holding Jacob said, pressing the rifle harder against his temple. "Enemies. We should kill him. And them." "No." Kyle's voice was a whip crack. He never took his eyes off Sarah. He stepped closer, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly as he looked at the baby. Adam, sensing a new presence, quieted his cries, his small, dark eyes fixing on the warrior. He was sick," Sarah rushed to explain, tears blurring her vision. "A fever. I saved him. I didn't know who he was. I couldn't let him die." Kyle looked around the room. He saw the small tin of sweetened milk, the boiled willow bark in a cup. He saw Thomas's cradle, now lined with Sarah's own shawl. His gaze lingered on the empty cradle, then moved back to her. "You saved him. From the storm," Kyle said slowly, "only to have him found by us. Fate has a cruel tongue." "We are not your enemy," Sarah pleaded. We just want to live." "That is all any of us want," Kyle said. He looked at the warrior holding Jacob. "Let him up." The warrior hesitated, then reluctantly lowered his rifle. Jacob scrambled to his feet, pulling Sarah behind him, his body a shield between her and the Apache leader. "What now?" Jacob asked, his voice rough. "You have the baby. You have what you want." "What I want," Kyle said, "is Silas Croft. He and his men are still out there." He gestured to the window. "They are close. We tracked them to this valley. They are wounded, starving. They will see your smoke. They will see our horses. They will know." Kyle paused, a new, calculating light in his eyes. "They will believe we are attacking you," he said, more to himself than to them. "They will see us as a threat. But if they are desperate, they may see you as an opportunity, a place to make a stand, a fortress." A shout from outside interrupted him. A warrior burst through the door, his chest heaving. He spoke rapidly in Apache, pointing toward the wooded ridge to the south. Kyle's face darkened. He turned to Sarah and Jacob. "You have a choice," he said, his voice urgent. "A choice?" Jacob said, bewildered. "My scout has seen them. Croft, 4 men. They are moving through the trees. They are using our presence as cover. They think to sneak into your cabin, to take you hostage, to use you against us." Sarah's blood went cold. The Red Scarf Gang. They were here. Now. "They are 50 yards from your barn," Kyle said. "They will be here in minutes." What do we do?" Jacob asked, panicked. Kyle looked at the baby, who was now quiet in Sarah's arms. "That child is the son of Iron Eagle. He is the key to peace. Croft and his men. They are the wall between peace and war. They must not escape, and they must not take this child." The twist of their situation was so profound, Sarah could barely breathe. The men who had besieged her home were now her only protection. The baby she had saved, the one who had seemed a death warrant, was now the most important person in the entire territory. "Give me the child," Kyle commanded. Sarah flinched. "What? What will you do?" "I will protect him." Kyle held out his arms. "My men will surround this cabin. We will deal with Croft. But I will not risk the baby in a fight. I will take him. My men. We will be your shield. In return, this cabin will be our bait." Jacob looked at Sarah. His face was a map of terror. The outlaws he had feared were outside. The warriors he had feared were inside. "Sarah," Jacob whispered. "He's right. It's the only way." Sarah looked down at the baby. Adam. Her Adam. She'd saved his life, and now she had to give him up. She kissed his forehead, her tears falling onto his face. She breathed in his scent. "His name," she whispered, "is Adam." Kyle's expression didn't change, but a flicker of understanding passed through his eyes. "He has a name," he said. "Good. It will keep him strong." She walked forward and placed the baby, wrapped in Thomas's blanket, into the arms of the Apache war leader. Kyle held the child with a surprising gentleness. He turned to his men. "No arrows," he commanded in his language. "No fire. I want Croft alive, if possible. Iron Eagle must pass judgment. The others, they are worthless. Kill them." The warriors nodded, their faces grim. They began to file out of the cabin, melting into the twilight, taking up positions behind the woodpile, the fence, and in the barn. "Stay away from the windows," Kyle ordered Sarah and Jacob. "When the shooting starts, get on the floor." He turned to leave, the baby secure in his arm. "Kyle!" Sarah called out. He paused at the door. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small obsidian amulet, the thunderbird she had found in the cradleboard. It was with him. Kyle's eyes widened. He took the amulet from her, his fingers closing around it. "This is the mark of Iron Eagle's family," he said, his voice hushed. This proves everything." He looked at her, his gaze finally settling on her with something new. "Respect. You did not just save a child. You saved us all." He slipped out the door, disappearing into the purple dusk. A moment later, the cabin was empty. It was just Sarah and Jacob, alone again, the silence deeper and more terrifying than the blizzard had ever been. And then, a man's voice, rough and desperate, called from the trees. "Hello! Hello in the cabin! We're settlers. We're hurt. The Apache have us pinned down. Please, we need help." Silas Croft had arrived. "Don't answer," Jacob whispered. His voice was a dry rasp. He pulled Sarah down with him, his hand gripping her arm with bruising force. They crouched behind the thick, overturned oak table they used for dining, the only solid piece of cover in the room. Jacob pushed his rifle through a gap between the table and the wall, its barrel pointing toward the splintered, ruined door. "Help us!" the voice cried again, and this time it was closer, laced with a convincing, pathetic whimper. We're settlers, from downriver. The Apache, they hit us at dawn. They got my pa. We're hurt. Please, we need help. They're still out there. We saw your smoke." Sarah felt a pang of doubt. The voice was so desperate. What if Kyle was wrong? What if these were just settlers, caught in the same terrible net? Jacob must have sensed her hesitation. "It's a lie, Sarah," he hissed, his eye never leaving the crack in the chinking. It's Croft. He's trying to get us to open the door, to show ourselves. He thinks we're just settlers, ripe for the plucking." "I see 'em," Jacob breathed, his body tensing. "4 of 'em, just at the edge of the trees by the woodpile. One's limping bad. Another... God, they're dragging him. They are hurt. Kyle's men must have hit them hard." "They're fools!" the voice, undoubtedly Silas Croft, yelled. His tone changed, becoming strategic, as if speaking to a compatriot. "Just stay inside. We'll draw their fire. We'll make a run for your porch. Just be ready to open the door when we get there." "He thinks the Apache are only outside," Jacob whispered, a new grim understanding on his face. "He thinks he's running to shelter. He's walking right into the trap." Sarah held her breath, pressing her cheek against the cold floorboards. The cabin was a trap, and she and Jacob were the bait. The air was thick with the smell of the hearth fire, and a new, metallic tang of fear. A shadow fell across the one intact window, then another. "Now!" Croft screamed, a roar of desperation. "Run! Get to the house! Get in the house!" The sound wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor. It was the desperate, thundering slam of men's bodies hitting the already damaged door, but before they could hit it a second time, a new sound split the air. Crack! It was a rifle shot, impossibly loud, and it came from the barn. One of the outlaws, the one who was limping, screamed, a high, thin sound that was cut short. He spun around and collapsed into the snow, a dark stain spreading on his back. "Ambush!" Another man roared, his voice cracking with terror. "It's a trap! They're in the barn! Get in the house! Get in the house! Break it down!" The next sound was an explosion of wood and leather. The front door, barely clinging to its hinges, was ripped from the frame, thrown inward as 3 men tumbled into the cabin in a shower of snow, splinters, and frigid air. The one in the lead, a gaunt, bearded man with mad, desperate eyes and a bright red scarf, was Silas Croft. He scrambled to his feet, his revolver already in his hand. He was flanked by 2 others. One, a young man with a wild beard and a fresh, bleeding gash across his face, raised his pistol, his eyes locking instantly on the overturned table. He saw Jacob's rifle. "There!" he shrieked, leveling his gun. He never fired. There was no sound, just a sudden, heavy thwack. An arrow, fletched with dark feathers, seemed to simply appear, sprouting from the man's throat. He gurgled, a comical expression of surprise on his face. He pawed at the shaft, his pistol discharging harmlessly into the floor before he collapsed on top of the ruined door. "Red!" the third man screamed. This one, built like a bull, was named Gant. He reacted to his friend's death with blind rage, spinning and firing his own revolver wildly into the cabin. One bullet slammed into the oak table, the impact vibrating through Sarah's body. A second bullet smashed her favorite porcelain water pitcher on the mantel, sending shards flying. Jacob didn't hesitate. The cabin exploded with the deafening, confined roar of his rifle. The shot was perfect. Gant was thrown backward, as if punched by a giant, his arms flailing. He slammed into the cabin wall next to the fireplace and slid to the floor, leaving a crimson smear on the logs. The cabin was suddenly, shockingly quiet. The air was choked with sulphurous gunpowder smoke. It had taken less than 3 seconds. It was just Croft, and Croft was fast. He was a survivor. While his men were dying, he had assessed the room. He saw Jacob, fumbling to reload his single-shot rifle. He saw Sarah, cowering. Before Jacob could even pull a new cartridge from his belt, Croft lunged. He didn't go for Jacob. He went for the leverage. He grabbed Sarah by the hair, hauling her to her feet with a cry of pain. He spun her around, his arm locking across her throat, and pressed the cold, round muzzle of his revolver to her temple. The smell of unwashed wool, old sweat and whiskey filled her nostrils, making her gag. "Drop it!" Croft screamed at Jacob, his voice a raw, terrified shriek. He was panting, his mad eyes darting between Jacob and the now empty doorway. "Drop the rifle or I'll splatter her brains all over your precious fireplace. I swear to God I'll do it." Jacob froze, his face a mask of helpless agony. The new cartridge was halfway into the breech. "I said drop it! Now!" Slowly, his eyes locked on Sarah's, Jacob let the heavy rifle clatter to the floor. He raised his hands. "Good," Croft panted, dragging Sarah back toward the center of the room, using her as a human shield. "Good. You and those red devils. You set us up. He was interrupted by a new presence. Kyle stepped through the shattered doorway. He was alone. The baby was gone, presumably with another warrior. Kyle held no rifle, no bow. He held only a long, heavy-bladed knife in his right hand. He was calm, a figure of pure, cold judgment. Croft laughed, a raw, jagged sound that bordered on a sob. "Well, look at this. A chief. Come to beg for the woman? Or did you just come to watch?" "I came," Kyle said, his voice level. "For you, Silas Croft. Let her go." "I let her go. You kill me. I keep her. I walk out of here," Croft snarled, his logic clear and desperate. "You find me a horse. You give me food. You let me ride, or she dies. It's simple. I've got nothing left to lose." "You have your life," Kyle said, taking a single, slow step into the room. "My life is over if I stay here," Croft shrieked. You savages! You killed my men!" "My men," Kyle corrected. "Stopped murderers. You killed women. You killed children. You stole a baby. For what? Gold? Horses?" "I did what I had to do," Croft roared, his composure cracking completely. "It's a hard land. You don't know nothing about it. You people, you think you own it, but you're just in the way." "You," Kyle said, his voice dropping, "are a coward. You have always been a coward. You shoot women in the back, and now you hide behind one." The accusation hit Croft harder than a bullet. His arm tightened on Sarah's throat, making her gasp. "I have this!" Croft snarled, jamming the pistol barrel so hard into Sarah's head that she saw stars. "This is all the honor I need. Now back off. Back off, or she's dead. I'm warning you." Sarah's heart was a drum against her ribs. She was going to die. Here, in her own home, after surviving the blizzard, after saving the baby. This was the end. She looked at Jacob, his face pale and sick, his hands clenched in helpless fists. She looked at Kyle, his face a mask of cold granite, waiting. Stalemate. Croft would kill her. Jacob would die trying to save her. Kyle was waiting for an opening. She had to create the opening. She thought of Thomas, still and cold. She thought of Adam, warm and alive in her arms. She thought of the obsidian thunderbird in Cale's possession. She was not a warrior. But as Cale had said, she was not weak. She did the only thing she could. With all her strength, Sarah brought her heavy boot heel down, grinding it into the instep of Silas Croft's right foot. Croft screamed, a high, animal sound of pure pain. His grip on her throat loosened for just a fraction of a second. His body instinctively bent toward the source of the pain. It was all Sarah needed. She didn't pull away. She threw her entire body weight sideways and upward, twisting into him, driving her elbow into his ribs and, most importantly, shoving his gun arm toward the ceiling. The revolver went off. The shot was deafening, a blinding flash next to her face. The bullet tore a hole in the roof, sending splinters and bits of sod raining down. It was the last sound Silas Croft ever made. Kyle did not move in steps. He moved like a shadow. In the single instant that Sarah shoved the gun skyward, Kyle closed the 10 feet between them. His arm was a blur. His knife flashed once, a deep, powerful, upward stroke that buried itself to the hilt in Croft's chest, just under the ribs. Croft's eyes widened in profound, terminal shock. He released Sarah, his hands flying to the knife hilt, buried in his stomach. He stumbled back, a low gurgle escaping his lips. He looked down at the blood, at the Apache leader, and then he collapsed to the floor, dead before he stopped moving. The silence that rushed back in was profound, broken only by the ringing in Sarah's ears and the sound of her own gasping breaths. She was on her hands and knees, shaking violently. Jacob was on her in an instant, pulling her up, his hands frantically checking her for wounds. "Sarah, are you hit? Are you hit?" I'm all right," she panted, clinging to him. He missed. I'm all right." Kyle stood over Croft's body, his chest heaving. He yanked his knife free, wiping it clean on the dead man's red scarf. He looked at Sarah, who was now sobbing with relief in Jacob's arms. "You are not a warrior," he said, his voice quiet, "but you have the heart of one. You did not freeze." He turned and walked to the door, stepping over the body of the man called Red. He whistled, a sharp, clear note. "We will take our evidence," he said, nodding to Croft and the others. "We will take the dead. We will leave you to your winter." "The baby," Sarah whispered, pulling away from Jacob, her voice desperate. "Adam, is he safe?" Kyle paused at the door. He turned, and for the first time, Sarah saw something other than a warrior. She saw a man, tired and relieved. "He is safe. He is with my most trusted man, well hidden. I will take him to his father, Iron Eagle. I will show him this amulet." He touched his chest, where her amulet was. "I will show him the bodies of his wife's murderers. And I will tell him that the white eyes on Monroe's Creek saved his son and stopped a war." He looked at the devastated cabin, the shattered door, the blood on the floor. "The war," he said, "is over. Before it began. You have done a great thing, Sarah Monroe. You and your husband. You should be proud." Sarah nodded, fresh tears welling. Jacob put his arm around her, holding her tight, his knuckles white. Cale gave a single, sharp nod. Then he was gone. For the rest of the night, they sat, huddled by the fire, listening. They heard the sounds of the Apache, efficient and silent, collecting their dead and the bodies of the outlaws. They heard the horses, a low murmur of voices, and then nothing, just the sound of the wind, whispering through their broken door. When the sun rose, painting the snow in pale shades of pink and gold, Sarah and Jacob Monroe stood in the doorway of their ruined home. The valley was empty. The snow was pristine, save for the tracks of 50 horses heading south. They were alone. Sarah walked to the hearth. The empty cradle, Thomas's cradle, was still there. She reached in and touched the soft wool shawl, the one she had wrapped Adam in. Her heart ached with a loss so new and sharp it stole her breath. She had saved him, loved him, and lost him, all in the space of a week. "Sarah," Jacob said, his voice soft. He came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. The floorboards were stained, the air cold. "He's gone," she whispered. "He's home, Sarah," Jacob replied, his voice thick. "He's where he belongs. You saved him. You saved all of us." She leaned back against him, closing her eyes. The cabin was a wreck. The door was gone. The winter was far from over, and a deep, hard cold was already seeping in. But the silence, the suffocating, angry silence that had lived between them for 6 months, was finally broken. The wind was just wind. The cabin was just a home. And it was, for the first time in a very long time, quiet. Sarah and Jacob Munro survived that winter. Their cabin was repaired, but their lives were never the same. They never saw the Apache again. But 6 months later, as the spring thaw melted the last of the snow, Jacob found something on their porch, a bundle of pristine white ermine furs, and resting on top, a single perfect eagle feather. There was no note. There was no sign of who left it. But Sarah knew. It was a thank you. It was a promise. A life for a life. The karma of the frontier. Paid in full. The woman who risked everything for a child who wasn't hers had, in the end, saved not just one baby, but 2 warring nations, and herself. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and be sure to share this video with someone who loves a story of survival and unbelievable twists. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We have so many more real-life dramas and hidden histories to share with you. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think of Sarah's impossible choice.